You're listening to the Fezcast, produced on behalf of the Saracens Supporters Association and featuring the independent thoughts, rants and rambles of Saracens fans and special guests. If you'd like your opinion to be heard on the show, you can find the Fezcast on Facebook or Fezcast_SSA on Instagram and whatever Twitter is known as these days. But for now, enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to our next edition of the Fezcast. And joining me today to discuss, well, as I say, Carlsberg don't do rugby weekends, but last weekend was one of those that maybe they did. But joining us is Sam for one of your sort of like, it's slightly more regular Sunday, Sam, and Barry. But yeah, how are we, gentlemen? All good?
All good. Always happy after a winning weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 3 fine wins, wasn't it, Barry, in the end of the day, when you take the amateurs, Saracens women and Saracens men into account?
Yeah, absolutely. Cracking weekend.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Well, before we do that, I wanted to have a quick chat and a quick look back at the conversation we had last week with Mark Thompson, CEO of Saracens. And I think, yeah, got a lot of good feedback from a lot of people who really enjoyed the chat we had with him, guys. It came over, one, as a very personable guy, very upfront, you know, and honest and open and happy to be on the show. And he texted me afterwards and said, look, you know, he's happy to come on and talk to us more regularly, which I think is all good, you know. But he obviously waited a little while, get his feet under the table a bit, Sam. But, you know, once he was on, a lot of good things come out of it, didn't it?
Yeah, do you know, I think what was really nice about it was he was just very honest. And there was a couple of times when he said, this might not be the popular opinion, but, and I think when you're in the position that he's in, I think you can't necessarily always afford to be the most popular person because you've got to have the bigger picture in mind. And, you know, we're going into a general election year and it's all very much, you know, who's the most popular kid at school type thing with that. And I think it was nice that Mark seemingly cares more about the welfare of the club than he does about how popular he is in wider circles. And I think that was really, really good. He came across as a real honest guy that knows what he's doing, and he's got the credentials, he's got the belief, and clearly he's also got what sounds like a very, very clear next couple of years in front of him even, with you know, knows the task at hand very, very well. So yeah, I think he came across incredibly well. Some good questions posed by your good self, and yeah, it was a great interview. I think you're always worried when the likes of Lucy Ray steps down. You know, obviously incredibly popular herself as well as her dad. Mark had some big shoes to fill, and seemingly off the back of that interview, he knows exactly what he's doing. So yeah, long may it continue, and wish him all the best in the role.
Indeed, I mean, that's a very good point you made there, Sam, isn't it, Barry? In so much as that Lucy, you know, done such wonderful stuff for the club, her and her dad and the whole Ray family. But sometimes you looked at her and you realised, thought perhaps that she may be too much of a fan to be able to really give the hard, you know, decisions. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, it would be a very small criticism if it one at all, Barry. But yeah, Mark's come in afresh, with lots of different experiences. A bit like, if you remember, going back a long time ago, we had a guy called Peter Deakin at the club who was an amazing bloke, and really, you know, his footprint is all over the club, but he came in bringing ideas from rugby league and everything, Barry, and I can see that Mark could potentially be something quite similar to that.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Deakin was well before my time, unfortunately. But yeah, we almost needed, and this is not to denigrate Nigel or Lucy at all, we almost needed that break from the past to kind of put some historical events behind us. And obviously not only has Mark come in with a fresh pair of eyes, a fresh outlook and a fresh opinion on things, he's given us that little bit of that little bit of separation between what's gone on in the past and what the future holds. And yeah, Sam's right, he spoke very, very well last week, said some things that I didn't agree with, but when I had a chance to listen to another opinion and to think about maybe what he's saying, particularly around promotion and relegation, was the big one for me. I can certainly see his point. There's still a bit of me that wants our sport to be a total meritocracy, where if you're good enough, you're promoted. But I can certainly see the points he was making from a commercial point of view, that the owners and people who are going to put money in do need that stability, if you like, and that knowledge that they're not all of a sudden going to get the chair kicked away from underneath them.
Well, absolutely, Barry. I think that's a very important point. Moving on from that, though, last week was another milestone for us because the Fezcast had its 25,000 download on Buzzsprout. So that's season 2, 3, and 4. 25,000 people have, well, not 25,000, but 25,000 times has it been downloaded, which is absolutely fantastic. And I mean, we had 250 people last week here listening in to Mark's thing. So thank you to everybody who has downloaded it. And as I say, hopefully you got a lot out of it, as you will do out of this show, given that hopefully we've got an interview. We don't know who the interview is at this point, but in the middle we might have an interview. But we've obviously got to talk about 3 wins. But first, before we have a little break, before we talk about the women's game, I want to have a little bit of a moan. Now, the ongoing saga has been Billy and Vunipola and his inability to hold his amarettos and orange juices. And anyway, why should you? RFU have waded in and have warned him about his future conduct, which I think is one of the most pointless wastes of time, seeing as we all know, I mean, it hasn't been announced yet, but let's be honest about it. He's off to France at the end of the season. He's not going to be a Saracens player, and therefore he's not going to be an England player. And I don't think he's ever going to be in Steve Borthwick's thinking with the amount of younger number 8s out there, although, you never say never. But it just seems to me, Sam, that, the RFU have pandered to the Daily Telegraph and the Daily Mail and all the other boo boys and had to come out and tell him off. And quite frankly, it was why bother?
But exactly what you say is true, but there's also another part of it, which is that the club themselves have come out and said, we've dealt with this situation. It was a club trip. He's a club player. He's currently not an England international player. We've dealt with it. So is there an element of undermining the club by the RFU feeling the need to jump in and say something else? As you say, just completely unnecessary and just a non-story. It's one of those probably things that the papers love to jump on. But yeah, look, if you've got a Saracens jersey on, you're always going to have a little bit of a target on your back, unfortunately, for reasons we've haven't quite mentioned yet again on the show. And everyone's got to be extra careful, haven't they? Doesn't matter who you are, if you're wearing the Saracens top, you're going to be under fire. And we're in that situation again, unfortunately.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Barry, I don't remember Manu Tuilagi when he was jumping off the bridges in Auckland after a British Lions tour being reprimanded quite so publicly, nor Danny Cipriani when he was rugby tackling buses in Bath Centre or wherever it was. I mean, it does seem there's a little bit of a double standard there, doesn't it?
Yeah, I just wish the RFU would be a little bit quicker in trying to sort out the things they've actually got to do, like the championship and the grassroots game, and leave things like that to the clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, shall we have a break there? We'll have a word from one of the, have a little bit of a jingle, and then we'll come back and discuss some good stuff, i.e. the women against Sale with a big, big win on the weekend.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Hi, Alex Osterberry here, Director of Rugby for Saracens Women. You're listening to the Saracens Fezcast.
This is the Fezcast.
Well, yeah, as I said before the break there, we got to discuss the women's game versus Sale, where I think it was 54-21 or something, an awful lot of points. And I mean, we discussed it with Mark Thompson, the fact that, the women's game kicks off half an hour before the men's game, so you kind of like had to have a juggle as to what you were doing, or watch one on the laptop and one on the TV, or whatever you were doing and everything. But Barry, I mean, you said you watched the first 20 minutes of the Sale women and the game against the Sale women, and bonus point try had already been scored, hadn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Saracens came out of the blocks like the class act that we know they are. On the scheduling, it's a little bit unfortunate, but I suppose that would take a lot of head bashing together to try and work out a schedule that works for everyone. I mean, I'm sure the club are as frustrated as anyone else about it, and certainly Mark alluded to that last week. But yeah, great performance all round. I suspect, looking at the score, and I didn't see the rest of the game, unfortunately, I suspect they took their foot off the gas a little bit, having scored the 4 tries. I think it was actually in 18 minutes they managed to do it. So, yeah, certainly, and there were some good tries in there as well. They looked very, very strong again from the off.
Well, indeed, and I mean that comes off the back of the interview that Matt did with Alejandro last week as well. We're talking about the cup, the Allianz Cup, and winning that has given the team a spark again, hasn't it? That installation of confidence is there's no substitute for it, is there, Sam?
No, and I think also you've got to give a lot of credit to the fact that there was a bit of disruption with players coming back from international duty. Sometimes actually that can have a negative impact. I think in years gone by, we've seen where some players in the men's team that have come straight off the Six Nations, particularly if England had done well or whatever, you almost get a bit of a hangover. So, considering the success England had in the Six Nations, there was a really big chance that there was going to be a lot of tired bodies, etc., and that didn't really show. Obviously, in the run-up, it looks as though they all trained cohesively together, because in the annoyingly the highlights I saw, they were very, very short, really weird video that I watched. So they didn't actually show a lot, but it did look as if it was there was one team in it, and you've got that comes out of, as Ivan Van Zyl said after the men's game, that comes out of a good week of training, and there was the chance of being a bit disrupted with the cup last week and players coming back into training from internationals, but it looks like we've just gone from strength to strength, and good timing as well, because as we know, we're in the run-in with the men's team. It's so important to have a good strong run-in, and it looks like the girls are doing us proud on that front, so fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. You've lost a Hartbury coming up next for him. I think on that point you made there, Sam, Barry, I would say, I mean, as you said, Sam, sometimes it's disruptive for players to come in. I think what's clear here is there's an awful lot of players who've been part of the Allianz Cup campaign that have said, look, we're good enough to be playing league week in, week out, and there's players who've come back from international duty who are obviously flying, and that competition has inspired both sets of those players to come together, fight in the right way for those positions, so that if you're playing number 1 through to number 23 for Saracens women, you are playing at the very best, because if you're not, there's somebody else equally good who's going to come in and take that place, Barry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, competition for places is a great spur through all sports, and having that, and it's something that the men have got to a degree as well, except perhaps at fly half. But having that competition for places, it keeps you on your edge, and it makes you bring the best of your game to training and also to a match day performance as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a couple of other things on the women's game that I wanted to pick up on. First off, names on shirts. What a brilliant thing. I mean, how long has it taken them to do it? But the players had their names on the shirt, and that is so important. I think that people now are linking, I remember when they started putting names on men's shirt, and there was a lot of, a bit of opposition to it. It's changed at the end of the day. This is such the right thing to do, Sam, isn't it? Giving these superstar players that identity that people, and there'll be kids going out and having Marley Packer's name on their shirts or whoever, won't they?
Yeah, and Joe, I think that's what it is. I mean, I never played at a high enough level to have my name on my shirt, but I did go on a tour once where we had names on our shirts, and I know it sounds stupid, but it did give you a little bit of a lift. You felt an elevated level of importance, and I think having those names on the shirts, like you say, you want the kids to look and go, not only do I want to buy a Saracens shirt, but I want to buy a Saracens shirt with my favourite player's name and number on the back. And it might seem really minor, but it gives them, it gives them a superstar to look up to, and then gives them a way of actually showing off how much they think about that particular individual as well. So look, it's a simple thing, but I think it could end up making a big difference. And I think this seems to have taken probably longer than it should have done to happen, really.
Well, indeed. I mean, considering as well that Saracens women have been in existence, as we found out this weekend, 35 years, as they had a big 35th anniversary bash. And I mean, obviously, I couldn't get along to that, but I saw the photographs that Dave Loxham had put up on the Saracens Supporters Association side, and it looks like, wow, they had a fantastic night. But what a brilliant group of people, players, administrators, management, whatever. You know, it's one whole family. We talked about it with Mark and then last week about him being part of that family. That family's there, and it doesn't matter if you played for Saracens 35 years ago or if you're playing for Saracens now. If you played one game for Saracens or 250 games for Saracens, you are part of that family, Barry. And it was wonderful to see all those photographs of everybody having such a great time on the weekend.
Yeah, that was a proper rugby club gathering, wasn't it? With some vets there and some superstars and current players, and that just looked like a brilliant evening. And I wish I'd been there. That's all I can say.
Well, absolutely, myself too as well. Look, shall we have a break there? And potentially after the next jingle or whatever, we may be having an interview. Otherwise, we'll be coming back and talking the men's game, and it's up in the air. It all depends what happens tomorrow. But yeah, let's stop there, and then we'll be back in a minute.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
You're listening to the Fezcast, which is proudly sponsored by the Saracens Supporters Association, and I'm Alison Davis, one of the SSA committee. For a £10 annual subscription, the SSA provides our members with monthly newsletters, virtual and in-person player events, away match ticket allocations, and we organise pre-match gatherings at away matches. We sponsor men's and women's players, and we support the Saracens Foundation Track Club on behalf of our members. On top of all that, every year we have a seasonal SSA badge, which is exclusive to members. Where else can you get that much value for a tenner? Join now at membermojo.co.uk/SSA, or come and see us on match day in the Oasis at the Stonex.
This is the Fezcast.
Well, of course, we interrupt this Fezcast to not bring you an interview, as we were meant to be recording it on yesterday, Tuesday, an interview with somebody, but obviously the news came out at the club that for the first time in I don't know how many years, next season we'll see no Vunipolas putting on a playing shirt for Saracens. Now, obviously, we would want to give both Maku and Billy the full treatment, which we will do on next week's show. And of course as well, Manu, who's had his moments in a Saracen shirt. But just suffice to say, from the Fezcast to Maku, Billy and Manu, congratulations on fantastic careers at the club, and all the best for the future. And as I say, we will be giving them full tribute next week. Now, back to the show, and myself, Barry and Sam discussing the weekend for the men at Bristol Bears.
Hi, this is Petrus Duplessis, and you are listening to the Fezcast.
Well, as I say, I have no idea whether we did do an interview or not. I'm hoping we did, and if we did, it was obviously brilliant because I asked really great questions, don't I, Sam?
Fantastic. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Absolutely. Well, look, we're going to talk about Saracens men, but before we do that, I mean, another piece of silverware in the Saracens family, Saracens Amateurs, and I've got to get this right. I've got the thing up here. Won Counties 2 South Shield 2024 champions. We're the Papa Johns. I mean, but brilliant. Well done, Saracens Amateurs. You know, a club that's kept that amateur side of the club going brilliantly over the years, and we've spoken to them in the past, and wonderful to see them win some silverware, Barry.
Yeah, a couple of years I've been on this. Really must get that right next season. But yeah, it's great to see them doing well. They're clearly a strong grassroots club. They've got some quite a big youth and mini section, I believe, and they are heading in the right direction and keeping the amateur ethos of the game and the Saracens name involved in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, great to see. But what we do need to talk about is, you know, with everything else that's gone on, the performance of the weekend, I think, across all games. And, we saw some amazing games and results over the weekend, at least not Gloucester declaring for 90 runs for loss and no wickets. Saints scoring 90 for no loss. Because I'm sure that's what it was at Wantage Road, wasn't it, Northampton, not at Franklin's Gardens. But, I mean, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. But, yeah, I think the performance of the weekend is Saracens going down to the West Country for the second week in succession at the right time of the season, and God knows how they do it, how they manage to get it right at the end of the season and put in performance after performance. And where the Bath game was blood, guts and mud and, and sheer dog, this was a game of some rare skill. And I mean, we'll talk about the skipper a bit later on, but from 1 to 23 again, just outstanding performances, Sam.
Yeah, do you know what I've thought for the last couple of years? We've gone from a team that's best when it's a cold, rainy day and we just need to tuck it up our jumper, to a team that delights in chucking the ball around, because we've got from 1 to 23, we've got people that can chuck the ball around. We've got people that can cut holes in defences. I mean, that try that for Gonzalez that Cinti set up, that what a great little dart that was. Almost looked like he was making everyone else go in reverse. He went so quickly through. But for me, and I called it 10 minutes from time, man of the match, or player of the match as they call it now. Daly, outstanding. Massively underrated player, ridiculously. And again, when Daly is given time and space on the ball, we look a different team. And I really hope that he continues this, because yes, you talk about Faz, you talk about Van Zyl, who I thought also had a decent game again, but in terms of putting pace into our attack, there's no one better than Daly at the moment. And when he gets his hands on the ball, everyone gets a bit excited, because he'll do something pretty awesome. So Daly, quite rightly, player of the match, but it could have been a few different players. A lot of people put their hands up.
Indeed, and I want to talk about a few of them in a minute. But before I do that, Barry, the one thing I will say is Bristol Bears showed, I think there's a big problem there. They believed the media. And even, Flats and Austin Healy and all the pundits across the board, Hugo Monia, were saying, Bristol will just come out and they'll run Saracens all over the pitch and create holes here, there and everywhere. And, it was like a case of they just need to play French-style sevens rugby and Saracens will fold. And actually, Saracens just went, you know what, you want to play that type of game? Yeah, we'll have a bit of that. We'll have some fun. We'll do some entertainment. And, I mean, didn't nobody learn from when we put 900 points on Quins at the stadium? If we've got a team who are going to give us space and be slightly inaccurate at clinical moments, we'll exploit it. And we're some of the best in the world at exploiting those situations, Barry.
Yeah, and Bristol's predictability, if you like, and the fact that they're going to run almost irrespective of where they are on the pitch, made our defence easier as well, because it enabled us to push up and to get the lines right. We didn't have to worry about a 50-22, for example. We didn't really have to worry about them kicking it at all, because they weren't ever going to kick it. No matter where they started, we knew they were going to try and run. We knew they were going to try and pull us wide, and all we had to do was just defend and wait for them to make a mistake. And I think our defence at the weekend was brilliant, but it was aided by Bristol's predictability and the fact that we could set up a certain way and we knew what was coming.
Absolutely. I mean, it's my big bugbear, isn't it, about teams not having a plan B. And I think it was either Hugo Monia or David Flatman had pointed it out in the review after the game, when they said, Bristol, it wasn't the fact that they played particularly badly or anything. It was just the fact that Saracens coped with it fantastically, and they had nowhere else to go other than just continue to try and throw the ball about. And Saracens were lapping it up and enjoying it. And that's a big problem. That's when elite coaches become super elite coaches that when they can get the message on, and it does help if you've got a player like Owen Farrell on the pitch. And I don't think Bristol, particularly when McGinty went off, had that player who could turn around and say, do you know what, this ain't working, lads, let's do something different. Which is a surprise because you got Luatara on the field, you got Fritz Harding on the field, you got experienced players there, but they just bought into the Kool-Aid of, if we throw it around and play sevens, we'll win the game. Now, Sam, you mentioned Elliot Daly. You're absolutely right to mention Elliot Daly. I think he had a particularly fantastic game. And that one reverse pass around his back that was just outstanding. But I do want to pick out 4 players who I thought had really, really good games. And the interesting one, the first one I'm going to pick out, is Marco Riccioni, because the first 10 minutes, he was put on toast by Carl Sinclair, wasn't he? Ellis Genjan. So he was absolutely put on toast. And Mako wasn't having a great time the other side. And you thought, oh, crikey, here we go. It's a long, long old day at the coalface for him. But Marco, again, what you want from prop forwards sometimes is they just have a bit of dog and stay in the fight. And he got on top, didn't he, in the end?
Yeah, I think he's a bit of an underrated force, actually, because I do think you're right. There are a lot of players out there that when things are going well, they look great, and when things aren't looking good, they fall apart. I don't think Marco's one of those players. He's had a lot of adversity to deal with from an injury front for the last few years, and he seems like the kind of player that whenever he's on the pitch, he just makes the absolute most of it. If things aren't going too well, he'll pick himself up and he just keeps going back over and over and over again. And you're right, scrum time at the beginning wasn't fantastic, but we slowly turned the screw over time. And I think that's the sign of a good team, particularly in the scrum. I was never fortunate enough to play in the scrum myself, but you know, I can't imagine how difficult it would be to be under the cosh and be able to turn it around in that environment. If your line out's a bit suspect, you can figure that out. In the scrum, there's so much more to it than just 8 lads hitting against each other from each team. And so I think credit needs to go to Riccioni, but also the rest of the front row for turning that around as well, because that's no easy feat to do.
Absolutely. And what I will do though is give credit to someone in the engine room of that scrum, Barry, who I thought had an absolutely amazing game. And Marrows will take your highlights a lot, and your Fiat finals will come on. Hugh Tizard did a George Cruz job against Bristol. He ran the engine room. It was a diesel engine, giving it lots and lots of torque, but it was a turbo diesel engine as well, because there were a couple of hits he put in and a couple of last-ditch tackles. I think there was one where he grabbed hold of somebody's shorts and just hung on for dear life. He grew up in that game a big, big way, I thought, Barry.
Yeah, he gets through an awful lot of work that often goes unnoticed. But yeah, it was especially good at the weekend, and I think we're finally seeing what we thought we'd see around about a year ago from him now, and he's just consistently brilliant without getting the headlines, and long may it continue.
Absolutely. I think he's probably bulked out a little bit, put on a couple of kilos of muscle that has helped him a great deal without losing that youthful speed and agility around the pitch. Another player in the forwards, though, who stood up and put a lot of work in and kept Billy Vunipola on the bench up until about 71, 72 minutes. Tom Willis is a proper machine. And fair dues to him, he had to step into the second row for 10 minutes when Barrow and Ben were on the naughty step. But every time Bristol kicked to him from restarts or whatever, and every time he took that ball and he ran it back at 150 mile an hour and just took a hit and then went through the hit and set the ruck up and gave Ivan, as you say, Sam, who had a great game, but he gave him a platform from which we could clear every single time.
I love watching Willis play. I really enjoy watching him play. And I think, actually, if you'd gone back to maybe the beginning of this season and you'd spoken to the coaching staff and you said, who's leaving at the end of the year, I don't think it would have been as obvious that Billy was going to move on until we've seen what Tom Willis has been capable of doing this year. I think he's a better player than Vunipola right now. And I think he has been for the vast majority of the season. And don't forget, he's actually keeping the England number 8 from that spot as well. I mean, we are blessed in the back row, I think, at the moment. And it's good. It's good to see. Isn't it nice when a signing just becomes a superstar? It's good to see. But yeah, I love watching him play. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick Kennedy has done his business again, hasn't he? I mean, we've got obviously one Martin Gonzalez, who we've spoken about ad infinitum on this show, and I'm sure we will be speaking about him at the end of the season when we give out our awards. But yeah, Ben Earl, that back row, it looks something special, doesn't it? I think that's a back row for the ages, for the future. That's got my mouth watering for certain. Moving into the back, so I do want to mention, I mean, since he set up a beautiful try, but the one player who has impressed me more than any other player in the backs and plays like a player 6 inches taller than himself, particularly under the high ball. But Rotimi Shegan, he is really, at the moment, 2 games, no injuries, that's great. And he is really, really setting things on fire, isn't he? There was a couple of runs he did. I mean, he got a great try as well, but a couple of runs he did were just outstanding.
Yeah, he's the sort of player that from the other side of the pitch that Ibitoye we thought Ibitoye was going to be, but it hasn't quite kicked on. But yeah, Rotti he's had his bad luck with injuries, as you say. He really deserves an injury-free period, and I think if he gets an injury-free 6 months, I think he can push for England honours.
Do you know, the issue with him was always defence. It was never attack. His defensive positioning up until a year or so ago was always that little bit suspect, but he's actually sorted that out as well. How many times this year have we seen him with cover tackles, getting back into defensive positions, helping out with that stuff? That's the underrated stuff that goes unnoticed with him now. He's clearly worked massively on that. He's always been so excited with the ball in hand, but now when he's added that defensive kind of prowess as well and knowledge, that just makes him the complete winger. And I think you're absolutely right, Barry. England don't have a Rotti, and I think if he stays fit, they could do with one, and he could be another piece of the puzzle for the England setup too.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it does help, as you say. You mentioned Elliot Daly, and also, but having Alex Good, your 2 15s behind you, they're obviously been very influential in not only himself but also Tom Parton on the other wing in helping those guys really realise their full potential there. Now, we do talk about the skipper a lot, but we're not going to have so many more opportunities to talk about the skipper. It potentially will be 3 games to talk about him. I think it's important we do talk about his game on the weekend because, well, one, I don't think he'll be training this week because everything he did on the weekend, he did on one leg because he obviously got a knock and it's got to be a concern. But I should think they'll just give him a couple of injections and let him do what he needs to do, sit in an ice bath for the week, I think. But, I mean, some of the stuff, I mean, the 2022 kick, it wasn't a 50-22, a 2022 kick that from his own 22 went out just short of the 5 metre line. That was outstanding. There was one kick across the field that Theo McFarland, in a absolute collector's moment, failed to take the catch and should have got a shout from Juan Martin Gonzalez behind him, who would have been straight in the bedbasket. But it was pinpoint accuracy. And then the chip to Theo Dan, giving it the full George Best's soft bits. I mean, it was just sublime. But the thing is, and what you see is, and you saw it when he was interviewed afterwards, he was signing stuff for kids and whatever, and Hugo go and grabs him out and everything. He is absolutely loving his rugby at the moment. The pressure's off of him, and he is playing with joy that I don't think you've really ever seen. And perhaps Owen Farrell, if he'd learned that a bit earlier on in his career, that would have been what made him the real superstar that we all know he is. Because if he could have played with that sense of freedom that he now obviously has, which I think he'll have at Racing next year as well, there is no better standoff in the world, Barry.
No, he's at the top of his game. He's clearly happy with not only his game but the things outside the game as well. His future's decided. He knows what path he's going down. There's no more speculation to be had over it. And you're right. He's relaxed. He's playing the game with a smile on his face, and he's showing everyone else, as you said, the player that we know him to be.
Yeah,
it's almost a bit of a shame that the two lads that have come in, Louis and Fergus, didn't get the opportunity to have a season with him, to learn some of the stuff. That's my one sort of worry, if you like, that there hasn't been that transition. But you're absolutely right. I mean, that kick. As a fly half myself, as I do mention occasionally, you can't say anything better about that kick. It honestly, the difficulty level of that was out of this world, and he made it look actually really, really easy. There was an element of luck to the bounce at the end, but there always is going to be with a rugby ball. But to get the trajectory on that, and get it into that position before the back three from Bristol can react. That is a hugely underrated skill. He's learned that straight from the Wigan books. Honestly, that's a Wigan kick, that is. But yeah, absolutely out of this world. We will miss him, but I also think we've got an exciting time coming up. And I think for all parties, this sort of transition period, I think that we're moving into, it feels like the right time. I haven't come across one Saracens fan just yet that's feeling worried about next season. I think everyone's actually quite excited for the next thing. So hopefully we'll give Faz and the other boys the send-off that they deserve with a really good run in.
Well, absolutely. Now, let's talk about what is happening and have a quick preview of what's coming up. But before we do that, we did mention it earlier on. Northampton Saints 90 for no loss against Gloucester. I'm afraid to say, yeah, I understand that Gloucester have got a European final, that they're going to put a lot of eggs in one basket. But quite frankly, and and we've done it before in the past. I remember us going down to Gloucester and putting a weekend side out. But we'd already qualified for, later parts of competitions and everything like that. I mean, Gloucester are going for the Bristol Gravy Cup, aren't they, at the end of the day, excuse me. And it's unprofessional. And I really don't understand the thinking behind it. That I would want my team, and I would be prepared to risk a few injuries and actually put them out there and test them and get them battle hardened. Because if it blows up in their face now and they do lose in that European final, Skivington's going to look a bit of an idiot, isn't he? Because that was unprofessional, Barry. Not only an embarrassment, but unprofessional.
Well, you've got to wonder what they're doing if they're reserve players, if you like, for want of a better way of putting it, are that disjointed and that poor a side put out. It's you've got to wonder what they've been doing to get themselves into that position where they've got squad players who clearly from the outside don't appear to be up to it, and it's difficult for Skivington. He's got a tricky job there. He's got to try and balance the injuries against the lack of freshness or the freshness of the players, and it is tricky. It was a bit bizarre what he came out afterwards, though, that he's got no regrets. I would imagine any Gloucester fans that travelled all the way to Franklin's Gardens on Saturday would have a few regrets, and maybe they'll be only too happy to share them with him.
I wasn't too.
I think it highlights. So all I was going to say is that I think, yeah, apart from the fact that obviously it's not nice to see a score like that, it does raise an additional concern of obviously a lot of players were playing for the first time in quite some time for Gloucester that day, and it just does raise the question of, are some of these players, it was the reason it was a cricket score because they were bad players, or was it because they were underprepared with lack of game time because we don't have the A-League anymore, we don't have the reserve league or anything like that, and are these players getting the game time at Hartbury or as our boys do down at Ampthill? Is that the way forward? I think that plays a role as well. I think looking at the highlights, it just looked as though it was a team of disjointed players that hadn't played a lot with each other. And that played a role as well, obviously against a very well-drilled and a very difficult to beat Northampton side at the moment. But I think that needs to probably be mentioned as well.
Well, indeed. But what it did throw up this weekend's results, led by our performance against Bristol, but also Chiefs beating Quins, but Quins getting bonus points, And, we've qualified now because of the games that happened, but it's still up in the air as whether we have a home or a away semi-final, and how important were those 2 late tries against Northampton Saints now, which I think we alluded to on a previous Fezcast. I mean, hugely important. But other than Northampton, who I don't think will be overtaken for our home game, but they could be in second place if they lose to Bath. And Bath have got to go and win to potentially get a home one. Otherwise, they're playing us at Stonex, which no team would want to go to, provided we beat Sale. Sale, if they beat us, can qualify still. And, we may be in fourth and having to go to Northampton. Every possible permutation's out there. And 6 or 7 teams could still be in the playoffs. And, that's great, isn't it? That's showing how good this 10-team league has been when we talked about all the promotion and relegation and all that sort of thing, Barry. The fact is, at the end of the season, other than Gloucester and Newcastle, everybody's got something to play for in these last games.
Yeah, and we've seen it before this season that almost anyone can beat almost anyone else in the league on a given day, and some teams have hit form at the right time like we have. Some teams have been consistently good like Northampton, and Bath as well, have had their runs of wins and what have you. But yeah, it's great to see that it's all boiling down nicely for a very exciting game, a set of games on Saturday. And as I think I put it on our group, at one point it was 1 versus 2, 3 versus 4, and 4 versus and 5 versus 6 for the final games. You couldn't have had the fixture computer couldn't have been kinder in terms of the interest from the final day.
Indeed, and TNT Sports and ITV Rugby must be rubbing their hands with glee. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I can see Bath going to Northampton, and Northampton may be a little bit of a hangover perhaps from that 90-0 win. Maybe, knowing that whichever way it goes, they've got a home semi-final. Wouldn't it be amazing if actually we go and beat Sale by enough points to get first and play whoever comes fourth, Quins, Chiefs, whoever it may be, at the Stonex, and Northampton playing Bath again, second versus third? I mean, it could happen, couldn't it, Sam?
Yeah, but I was talking about this at the weekend about if you're the coaching staff for Northampton, what do you do? Because you've got a top 2, and we know that really is all that matters. But at the same time, they then have a break the following week because of the Europeans. So for me, if I'm the Saints coaching team, I'm going to put the full strength team out, because if for whatever reason they end up having to play Bath, whether it's in the semis or the final, then they've got a recent history against them that they've given them a good see into, and that does stick in the mind. So look, end of the day, we've got to win our game. If we get a bonus point win, that's all that we can ask for, and I think that's all that the players will be focusing on at Saracens. But that Northampton Bath game is intriguing as hell. I'll be keeping an eye on that one for sure, because it's not outside of Bath's remit to put a score on Northampton, like you say, potentially with a bit of a hangover. They didn't get the run out they wanted to last week, so who knows? It's very, very exciting, but you're going to get this, as Mark said on last week's podcast, when you've got a smaller pool of teams and the talent is distributed more evenly between all of them. This is ultimately what you're going to end up with. And then if you do ring fence the league as well, is this then something that you're going to have, pretty much every single season? There is an argument for it, but that's for another discussion on another day. All we know is we've got an interesting weekend ahead of us.
Absolutely, and one we're all looking forward to, and I'm sure everybody listening into the Fezcast is. Sam, Barry, thank you for your time today, and as I say, if we have had an interview, thank you to the club for organising it, whoever it may be. If we haven't, well, you know, that's life, you know, our typical levels of professionalism, the fact that we have to record these around our normal working lives, as it were. But yeah, we'll be back next week, hopefully after a good win against Sale Sharks. League leaders, because Bath have done a job on Northampton, and a home tie against another, whoever it may be, and we'll look forward to that as well. So yeah, Barry, Sam, thank you for your time. Thank you everybody for listening in to the Fezcast, and we'll speak to you next week.
This is the Fezcast.